Hi everyone. We are about to start on the Coiffure by Mary Cassatt, one of our female painters and artists that we are discussing in our art history class. Before I really go into Mary Cassatt, I wanted to talk a little bit about Edgar Degas. He was left off the 250 by the College Board, and it's a really important thing to mention Edgar Degas, mostly because of his influence on other Impressionist artists, in particular Mary Cassatt. She was an American immigrant who immigrated to France and very wealthy, but still, being a woman made it a little bit more harder for her to be accepted as an artist. And so, Edgar Degas taking her under his wing and influencing her is going to have an effect on her painting. So let me go ahead and just talk a little bit about Degas. He didn't really call himself an impressionist. He really kind of thought of himself as independent, but he still has a lot of similarities with the impressionists and would exhibit many of his pieces at independent exhibitions. Instead of painting outdoors, though, Degas usually would compose his pictures in studios, usually from working from drawings or photographs. He was academically trained in the École des Beaux-Arts, but he's going to present his art in a different way. A lot of his themes and style is really closer to Manet than the rest of the Impressionists. He did paint a lot of modern Parisian life, especially venues of entertainment. The opera was a place that he did a lot of painting at. This is why there's so many ballerinas in his pieces. He has so many different pieces that involve ballerinas, which you could see on this page right here. But it also would be any other entertainers or ways that the bourgeoisie would be entertained in life. So today we really see ballerinas as being highly trained athletes, but back then they weren't considered that way. They were neither considered appropriate or beautiful to be put onto canvas. Instead, they were considered scantily clad women who often came from lower class families. He was drawn to this subject matter because he thought that he's showing a different class of people. And he did not draw or paint dancers in actual rehearsals. What he did was he would hire them to come to his studio and pose for him. So that is kind of how he composed his pieces. He was often criticized for picking unattractive dancers, yet these critics did not take into account that he's actually representing the realities of modern day life and who the dancers actually were. He did share with the Impressionists a taste for strong and sometimes even arbitrary color choices, despite the fact that most of his work represents figures in rather subdued interiors. But the subtlety of natural light in an interior provided him challenges. And in addition to his concern with light and color, he was also interested in interaction between movement and composition. And we see evidence of Japanese influence on him, the Japanese prints, because of the cropping. How this ballerina is cropped right here. This is the whole painting, what it looks like, and she's cropped off onto this piece, and that would be like a photograph would be. And he also has a lot of strong diagonals in his pieces. And then this piece right here is actually a sculpture by Edgar Degas. He did a few of these ballerinas, and I wish I had a few more pictures of it, but this is in the Norton Simon Museum, and it's not just bronze, but it also has on her skirt is kind of like raffia, and then she has a ribbon, like an actual ribbon that is attached to the back of her hair. And it's a beautiful sculpture that because um, it was made out of bronze, he has molds for them. And so after he died, a lot of people made many copies of these. So the Norton Sightman's lucky to have one, but you could see this piece in particular all over the world. Okay, so how did Edgar Degas affect Mary Cassatt? Well, using the female figure is going to be pretty standard in Mary Cassatt's pieces. She was born into a wealthy family in Philadelphia, trained there in Pennsylvania Academy for Fine Arts in the early 1860s, but will move to Paris for further academic training after that, and she stays there. And she'll exhibit at several of the independent exhibitions. She had a distaste for what she called the tyranny of the salon jury system and was one of the group's staunchest supporters. But she will diverge from the Impressionists in both style and technique because she's conditioned in part by her contact with Edgar Degas. She does remain a studio painter and printmaker like Degas. Cassatt would focus on a world she knows best. Domestic and social life prefer upper class or bourgeoisie women. She is known for her incredibly sensitive representations of women and children and sought to counteract that cliched stereotype of her time. The very sharp angle down creates foreshortened faces that she uses, and that's very similar to Japanese prints that you see. Here's a Japanese print on the left of the screen, and she's going to. It's in 1890, the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris showed an exhibition of Japanese woodblock prints, and these ukiyo-e prints, or pictures of the floating world, were comprised of scenes of mostly urban, bourgeois pleasures and natural beauty of Japanese people. So Cassatt is clearly pulling inspiration from the Japanese prints in which women are looking down around a mirror. This is actually a print. She did paint as well, but this one is a dry point etching, which is a printmaking technique similar to intaglio, but it's easier for an artist trained in drawing to master it as a tool because it's gonna use a pencil to help carve into the metal plate. So Cassatt would carve into a metal plate with a fine needle, and then the plate would be dusted with a powdered resin and heated until the resin melted into tiny mounds that hardened as they cooled. Then acid would be applied to the metal plate, which would bite into the channels along the resin droplets. The deeper penetration of the acid would lead to darker tones and and then a lighter application of acid would produce lighter shades of color. And so we get a variety of nuanced gradients of color, and it can be generated with a single print. And we can see that, particularly in this piece where you have a deeper kind of a peach color, but it's still pretty in this one here too, but then this color is a lighter form of this color. Same thing with the wall and her skin tone. Okay, so the reason why we're looking at a Mary Cassatt print versus a Mary Cassatt uh, painting is because of the fact that she believed that everyone, even though she comes from wealth, everyone, regardless of income or social position, should be able to experience art and own the works that they enjoyed. And on the right-hand side, it says, it's a quote from her, "I believe nothing will inspire a taste for art more than the possibility of having it in the home. I should like to feel that amateurs in America could have an example of my work, a print or an etching for a few dollars. That is what they do in France. It is not left to the rich alone to buy art. The people, even the poor, have a taste and buy according to their means, and here they can always find something they can afford." And that's a very important point because even people in times of economic hardship, there are still artists who are creating and people who crave to have any kind of art that could be music, that could be for us what's on Netflix, what's on television, what is also just different parodies that we've been seeing, or TikToks, or all the stuff that you guys are watching. All of that is part of the arts, although that's performing arts rather than visual arts, but it still makes the point that even in time of economic hardship, it shouldn't be just for the rich, it should be for everybody. And she truly believed that. Okay, let's get back to this piece. So let's see, she made the prints. Okay, I talked about that already. So with this piece, we have a voyeuristic view of watching a woman in a private setting that has its roots in Ingres La Grande Odalisque, which she studied in the Louvre in the 1860s. But this is not a sexualized view of a woman. It's a woman from a woman's point of view. It's just her getting ready for her day by putting her hair up in what's called a coiffure. That's a hairstyle. So we as the viewers are kind of at a slight leftward angle from the woman in the chair so that we see her through a reflection in the mirror and then she is looking away from. This downward gaze is similar to that ukiyo-e print from the Japanese prints and is partly as a study of shape and line. The curve and sloping back and neck echoes the curve of the chair, which stands in contrast to the vertical lines of the chair and mirror. There is a limited color palette. It enables us to focus on form and clarity of line, but it also echoes the qualities of pastels as what Cassatt usually used when she painted, like her friend Degas did. The act of doing one's hair has its roots in a wealthy woman's setting, like I think the Marie Antoinette pieces we talked about, whose rituals of dressing and preparing one's hair has passed down with these new ideas of femininity and beauty. And basically this is saying that we all have a single thing in common of doing our hair mostly by ourselves, and that's really at odds with the standard idea of a woman's hair being perfectly done. She also turns this like bathroom scene, or what they call a boudoir, Boudoir, of the past, like Titian would often use these, and she makes them so that they're like for like normal daily things rather than making them seem erotic. So she reappropriates these by creating these scenes to be just what women do on a daily basis. Here's another example of a Cassatt piece similar to where she's washing her face and you could see her reflection in the sink and the dress and so on. So she was kind of a trailblazer in the idea of using prints so that everybody can afford it, which wasn't common in America. But also she's a trailblazer in the fact that she's one of the few impressionist women that are accepted and shown for the art exhibits during this time period. So there's Mary Cassatt.